My name is Safiya Al-Harthi. I'm 12 years old. And on August 9, 2024, I was supposed to become the wife of a man who had lived 5 of my lifetimes. That was the night I was scheduled to disappear behind palace walls and never be seen as a child again. Instead, Jesus Christ heard a prayer I didn't even know I was allowed to pray. I'm speaking to you today from a protected location outside Saudi Arabia. It's been 8 months since the night that should have destroyed me, and I need you to understand what God can do when a child has absolutely nothing, no power, no rights, no voice, except Him. Ask yourself this question: what would you do if your childhood had an expiration date? I was born in Riyadh in 2012 into a world wrapped in silk and secrets. Our home wasn't a palace, but it felt like one: marble floors polished until they reflected the chandeliers above, servants who moved like shadows, rooms so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. My father wasn't a prince, but he served princes. That meant we lived in their orbit, close enough to touch royalty but never close enough to escape its gravity. To the outside world, my family was blessed. But privilege became my cage, and honor became the lock that sealed me inside. I don't have siblings. I was the only child, which made me precious in some ways and disposable in others. While other girls my age attended schools and played in parks, I lived behind walls that felt like they were closing in a little more each day. Tutors came to me. The Quran came to me. The world never came to me. My father was a devout man, respected in the circles that mattered. Every dawn, his voice would call me to far prayer before the sun could chase away the darkness. I learned to recite verses before I understood what the words meant. By age 7, I was performing all 5 daily prayers without question, my small body moving through the motions while my mind wandered to places I wasn't allowed to go. The ritual became as automatic as breathing. But even as a child, I felt the emptiness in the repetition. My religious education went beyond the normal teachings. Private instructors spoke about submission and obedience as if they were the only virtues that mattered. They taught that a girl's honor was fragile, easily shattered, in need of constant protection. They said questioning my father's decisions was the same as questioning Allah Himself. I memorized these teachings perfectly. But they left a strange ache in my chest, like wearing shoes that were too small. The whisper started when I was about 10 years old. Servants would speak in low voices when they thought I was sleeping, their words floating through the quiet house like smoke. They talked about blessings and great favors and a future being prepared for me. When I walked into rooms, their conversations would stop mid-sentence, and their eyes would follow me with something that looked like pity. I didn't understand why they looked at me that way. I was just a child. My mother was a beautiful ghost. She moved through our home silently, always dressed perfectly, always smiling when my father was present. But I caught her crying when she thought no one was watching, standing at windows that overlooked gardens she wasn't allowed to walk through alone, tears running down her face while her lips moved in silent prayers. When I asked why she cried, she would wipe her tears quickly and tell me they were tears of gratitude for Allah's mercy. But even at 10, I knew the difference between joy and grief. I knew what a caged bird looked like. During rare moments when my father granted me supervised internet access for educational videos, I glimpsed a world that looked nothing like mine. I saw girls my age riding bicycles, laughing with friends, attending schools where they sat beside boys without shame or fear. I discovered that other families, even Muslim families, didn't lock their daughters away like treasures too valuable to be seen. I began to notice how different my life was. At family gatherings, other girls my age would arrive with their parents and leave with hope in their eyes. I arrived like an exhibit and left feeling like everyone had been studying me for a purpose I didn't understand. The adults would watch me with expressions I couldn't read, some approving, some uncomfortable, all knowing something I didn't. By age 11, my natural curiosity started turning into anxiety. I had nightmares about being buried alive, about walls closing in until I couldn't breathe. I would wake up gasping, my heart pounding, feeling like something terrible was coming but not knowing what it was. The teachings about women and marriage began disturbing me more deeply. The clerics who visited our home spoke about wives as if they were objects, beautiful, valuable, but ultimately things to be owned and controlled. They said a woman's greatest honor was serving her husband, regardless of who he was or how old he was or whether she wanted him. When they spoke these words, they would glance at me. And in those glances, I felt something dark approaching. Have you ever felt trapped by the very people who were supposed to protect you? That feeling crept into my bones around age 11. The father who should have kept me safe was planning something that made my skin crawl. The religion that promised peace left me feeling terrified and alone. The family that called me their treasure was preparing to trade me for something I couldn't yet name. I performed all the Islamic rituals perfectly, 5 prayers a day, fasting during Ramadan, memorizing Quranic verses on command. But my heart felt increasingly distant from Allah. The prayers became words without meaning. The verses felt like chains wrapped around my thoughts rather than comfort for my soul. I was drowning in silk curtains and gold jewelry, suffocating under the weight of expectations I couldn't understand, desperately searching for something real in a world that felt completely artificial. And then came the afternoon that shattered everything. But before I tell you about that day, you need to understand the world I lived in, the golden cage that shaped me into the perfect, obedient girl everyone expected me to be. My earliest memory is of my mother's hands adjusting my hijab, pulling it tighter around my small face. I must have been 4, maybe 5. Lower your eyes, Habibti, she whispered, her voice gentle but urgent. The driver is coming. You must not look at him. I learned to stare at floors before I learned my multiplication tables. Our home sat in one of Riyadh's exclusive compounds, the kind where security check identification at 3 different gates before letting anyone through. The walls surrounding our property were high enough that I couldn't see the street, even when I stood on my tiptoes in the garden. Iron bars disguised as decorative lattice covered every window. My father called it protection. I called it normal, because I didn't know anything else. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., my father's voice would echo through the house, calling us to for prayer. I would stumble from my bed, wrap myself in my prayer garment, and kneel beside my mother on the prayer rug. The Arabic words flowed from my lips automatically, memorized sounds that I repeated without understanding their meaning. After prayer came breakfast, always in silence unless my father spoke first. Then lessons. My tutors rotated throughout the week, but they all taught the same thing, obedience dressed up as education. Mathematics, yes, but only after Quran recitation. Science, but filtered through Islamic interpretation. History that began and ended with the glory of the kingdom and the righteousness of our leaders. I never asked why I couldn't attend school like the daughters of my father's colleagues. I never questioned why my world consisted of 5 rooms, a walled garden, and the faces of people paid to serve us. I thought this was normal. My mother taught me the invisible rules, the ones that mattered more than any lesson from tutors. How to walk through a room without drawing attention. How to sit with my knees together and my hands folded. How to laugh quietly, if at all. How to disappear into furniture when men were conducting business in the next room. A girl's reputation is like a white cloth, she told me once, smoothing my hair with trembling fingers. One stain, and it's ruined forever. You must be perfect, Safiya. Always perfect. I tried so hard to be perfect. The servants were the only ones who treated me like a child. Fatima, our housekeeper from the Philippines, would sneak me sweets when my parents weren't watching. Ahmed, the gardener, let me help him water the roses even though it wasn't proper for me to do manual labor. But around my 10th birthday, something changed in the way they looked at me. I would catch Fatima staring at me with tears in her eyes, quickly wiping them away when I noticed. Ahmed stopped inviting me to help in the garden, suddenly formal and distant. The cook, Hassan, began giving me extra portions at meals, as if fattening me up for something. They whispered in corners, in Tagalog, in Arabic dialects I barely understood, in hushed tones that stopped the moment I entered a room. I caught fragments, so young, poor thing, such a shame. Allah protect her. When I asked my mother why everyone was acting strange, she went pale and changed the subject. When I asked Fatima directly, she pulled me into a tight hug and said nothing, just held me while her shoulders shook. I was 11 when my father's business associate visited with his teenage son. The boy was perhaps 15, pimpled and awkward. We sat in the same room, separated by 12 feet and my mother's watchful presence, and didn't speak a single word to each other. After they left, I overheard my father on the phone. "No, she's already promised." "Yes, I'm aware of his age. That's not a concern. The arrangement was made years ago." I didn't understand what he meant. But my stomach twisted with a dread I couldn't name. The walls of our beautiful home were closing in. I just didn't realize yet that they were about to crush me completely. The white dress appeared on my bed on a Tuesday afternoon in late July. I stood in my doorway, staring at it like it might come alive and swallow me whole. It wasn't a child's dress, the neckline was too sophisticated, the fabric too expensive, the cut designed for someone with curves I didn't have yet. My mother stood beside my window, her back to me, shoulders rigid. "Mama." My voice came out small. "Why is there a dress on my bed?" She didn't turn around. "Put it on, Safiya. Your father wants to see you." "But why?" "Just put it on." Her voice cracked on the last word. My hands shook as I changed, the silk feeling wrong against my skin, too smooth, too adult, too much like a costume for a role I didn't want to play. The dress hung loose in some places and tight in others, a reminder that my 12-year-old body wasn't ready for whatever this was. When I emerged, my mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, but her face was carefully blank. She reached out to adjust the dress, then pulled her hand back as if I'd burned her. "Mama, what's happening?" "Your father is waiting." She walked past me without meeting my eyes. I followed her down the hallway on legs that didn't feel like my own, the marble floor cold beneath my bare feet. Every step echoed. The house had never felt so big, so empty, so much like a tomb. My father sat in his formal receiving room, the one reserved for important business. He wore his best thobe, his gutter perfectly arranged. Another man sat beside him, older, with a silver-streaked beard and cold eyes that swept over me like I was a car he was considering purchasing. I stopped in the doorway, suddenly aware that I was being displayed. "Come here, Safiya." My father's voice was formal, distant. I walked forward, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "You have been chosen," my father announced, as if he were telling me I'd won a prize. "Prince Mansour bin Abdulaziz has requested your hand in marriage. This is a great honor for our family." The words didn't make sense at first. Marriage? I was 12. I still played with dolls when no one was watching. I don't understand, Baba." The old man beside my father smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "Your father and I have been discussing this arrangement for some time. You're a very fortunate girl." Something hot and terrible rose in my throat. "How old are you?" The smile disappeared. My father's eyes flashed with warning, but I couldn't stop myself. "How old are you?" I repeated, louder this time. "Safiya," my father started. 62, the prince said coolly. Though I assure you, I'm in excellent health. 62. 62. I was 12. The math was impossible, obscene, wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. He wasn't old enough to be my father, he was old enough to be my grandfather. He had lived 5 of my lifetimes. While I was learning to walk, he was already middle-aged. No. The word escaped before I could stop it. My father stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. Safiya. No, Baba, please, tears burned my eyes. I'm 12. I'm just 12. I don't want to get married. Please, Baba, please. This is not a discussion. His voice was ice. This is Allah's will. Prince Mansour has chosen you to be his wife. The contract will be signed next month. The wedding will take place when you turn 13. But I don't want. What you want is irrelevant. He stepped closer, towering over me. You will obey. You will be grateful. This marriage will secure our family's position and bring us great honor. Your feelings are a small sacrifice for such blessings. I turned to my mother, who stood like a statue by the door. Mama, please. She looked away. The prince rose, adjusting his robes. She'll adjust. They always do. Young wives are easier to mold. He said it casually, like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. I want to stay a child, I sobbed. Please, I just want to be a child. My father's hand connected with my cheek, not hard enough to leave a mark, but sharp enough to silence me. The sting was nothing compared to the look in his eyes, cold, absolute, final. You stopped being a child the moment you were chosen. Accept your destiny with grace, or accept it in shame. Those are your only options. He walked out with the prince, discussing contract details and dowries as if I weren't standing there with tears streaming down my face and my childhood bleeding out on the marble floor. My mother approached slowly, reached out as if to comfort me, then let her hand drop. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she left me there alone in that white dress that felt like a burial shroud. From that moment on, everything changed. I was no longer Safiya, the girl. I was Safiya, the bride. And I had exactly 37 days until my life ended. The women came 3 days later. 4 of them arrived in black abayas, carrying measuring tapes and fabric samples and notebooks filled with numbers that would define my new existence. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't ask my name. They simply gestured for me to stand in the center of my room and began circling me like vultures around something already dead. Arms up. Turn around. Stand still. The measuring tape wrapped around my chest, barely there, the chest of a child, and I heard one woman tsk softly. Another wrote something in her notebook that made them exchange glances I couldn't interpret. She's very small, one murmured in Arabic, probably assuming I wouldn't understand the dialect. She'll grow into it, another replied. They always do. They measured everything, my waist, my hips, my neck, the length from my shoulder to my wrist, the circumference of my fingers for rings I didn't want to wear. They touched me clinically, impersonally, the way you'd measure fabric before cutting it into something useful. I wasn't a person to them. I was a project. When they finally left, I scrubbed my skin in the shower until it turned red, trying to wash away the feeling of their hands. The jewelry came next. Heavy gold necklaces that made my neck ache. Bangles that clinked against each other and left marks on my wrists. Rings that spun loosely on my child-sized fingers. A headdress so elaborate and heavy I couldn't hold my head up straight while wearing it. You must get used to the weight, the jewelry mistress said, forcing another bracelet onto my arm. A princess wife must display her husband's wealth. I wore the jewelry for hours each day until my shoulders throbbed and my wrists bruised. At night, I'd stare at the marks on my skin, purple and yellow reminders that I was being shaped into something I didn't recognize. Khalid arrived to teach me wifely duties. She was ancient, with a face like dried leather and eyes that had seen too many girls like me. She spoke about obedience as if it were the only virtue that mattered. About submission as if it were love. About endurance as if it were honor. A wife does not refuse her husband, she said, her voice flat and final. A wife does not complain. A wife does not cry where he can see her. You exist to serve, to please, to produce sons. She taught me how to walk, smaller steps, eyes down, making myself as small and unobtrusive as possible. How to sit, knees together, hands folded, taking up as little space as a shadow. How to speak, quietly, briefly, only when addressed. She was teaching me how to disappear while still breathing. My room became a prison within a prison. A guard was stationed outside my door, for my protection, my father said. I couldn't walk to the garden without supervision. Couldn't use the internet. Couldn't make a phone call. My world shrank to four walls and the faces of women preparing me for slaughter. The days became smaller, tighter, harder to breathe through. At night, I prayed on my prayer rug until my knees ached and my forehead was marked from pressing against the floor. I begged Allah to change my father's heart. To make the prince choose someone else. To give me a way out that wouldn't destroy my family's honor. Please, I whispered into the darkness. Please hear me. Please help me. But my prayers felt like they hit the ceiling and fell back down, unanswered. Allah felt distant, no, more than distant. He felt absent. Like I was praying to empty air, to a God who couldn't hear me or wouldn't listen or didn't care that a 12-year-old girl was being gift-wrapped for a man old enough to be her grandfather. The teachings I'd memorized my whole life suddenly felt hollow. This is honor, they'd told me. This is blessing. This is Allah's will. But how could honor feel like horror? How could blessing feel like a curse? How could Allah's will feel so completely, utterly wrong? I curled into myself each night, my body aching from the weight of gold I didn't want to wear, my heart aching from prayers that went nowhere, my soul screaming a truth I didn't have words for yet. This wasn't love. This wasn't honor. This wasn't God. This was sacrifice dressed up in silk and called sacred. 29 days left. Then 25. Then 20. The calendar on my wall became a countdown to my own execution, each X marking another day closer to the moment I would cease to exist as Safiya and become simply the prince's wife. Time was running out. And I had nowhere to run. The tablet arrived 18 days before the wedding. My father placed it on my desk with strict instructions, educational videos only. Islamic lectures. Quran recitations. I've installed monitoring software, so don't think about accessing anything inappropriate. He left before I could respond, the door clicking shut behind him like a cell locking. I stared at the device for hours before touching it. Even gifts felt like traps now. But that night, when the house fell silent and darkness pressed against my window, desperation won over fear. I opened the tablet with trembling fingers and typed the words I'd been too afraid to speak aloud. Forced marriage. The search results made my stomach clench. Page after page of stories, articles, organizations fighting against something that had a name, something that wasn't just my nightmare but a global crisis. I wasn't alone. There were thousands of girls like me. I typed another search, child bride. More results. Pictures of girls my age dressed in white, standing next to men old enough to be their grandfathers, eyes empty and haunted. I saw my future in their faces. My hands shook as I scrolled through articles about human rights, about laws, about people who believed this was wrong, not just uncomfortable or sad, but wrong. Fundamentally, deeply, criminally wrong. Everything I'd been taught said this was honor. But these articles called it abuse. I clicked on a link titled Organizations Helping Child Brides and found myself on a website that looked nothing like the Islamic sites I'd been raised on. At the top of the page, in simple text, was a sentence that stopped my breath. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Jesus. The name felt dangerous even in my thoughts. Christians were people my tutors spoke about with disdain, infidels who'd corrupted God's true message, who worshiped three gods instead of one, who were destined for hell. But that sentence. God wanting children to come to Him? Not to be used, not to be sacrificed, not to be traded, but welcomed? I'd never heard God described like that. My finger hovered over the link. Every instinct trained into me screamed to close the page, to delete my search history, to forget I'd seen it. But something stronger, something desperate and dying, made me click. The article told stories about Jesus. How he defended a woman caught in adultery when religious leaders wanted to stone her. How he spoke to women in public when it was forbidden. How he touched lepers, healed the sick, and told those in power they were hypocrites when they burdened people with rules while ignoring justice and mercy. I read about him welcoming children, blessing them, saying that heaven belonged to people like them, the powerless, the innocent, the overlooked. This Jesus sounded nothing like the God I'd been praying to. This Jesus sounded like he actually saw people. Like he cared about the ones everyone else threw away. I navigated to another site, then another, swallowing these forbidden words like someone dying of thirst. Stories of Jesus protecting women, challenging traditions that harm people, choosing love over law, mercy over rules. One passage made me cry, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest. When had I last felt rested? When had I last felt anything but fear? I read until my eyes burned and dawn light crept under my door. Then I carefully deleted my history, not well enough to fool real monitoring software, but well enough to fool a father who didn't actually check. The next night, I searched again. And the night after that. I learned to clear caches, to use private browsing, to cover my tracks like a thief stealing something precious. Each night, I read more stories about this Jesus who seemed to love the people everyone else discarded. One article quoted him saying, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, but whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." Jesus was angry about children being harmed. Not silent. Not distant. Angry. I thought about the prince, about my father, about all the religious men who told me this marriage was Allah's will. And I wondered if what I was reading was true, what Jesus would say to them. 14 days left. I sat on my prayer rug one night, the tablet hidden under my mattress, my heart pounding with something that felt dangerous and holy at the same time. I didn't pray toward Mecca. Instead, I looked up at the ceiling, up beyond it, really, and whispered a name I barely knew how to pronounce. Jesus. It felt like betrayal and freedom in the same breath. Jesus, if you're real, if you really love children, if you really see me. I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know if he could hear me. I didn't even know if I believed yet. But I whispered his name into the darkness like a drowning person calling for help. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and desperation, a tiny spark of something ignited. Hope. The lock clicked from the outside at 9 p.m. on August 8th. "For your protection," my father said through the door, his footsteps already retreating down the hallway. "The engagement ceremony is tomorrow. You need to be well rested and prepared." protected. As if the danger was outside my room instead of waiting for me tomorrow in the form of a 60-year-old man with a marriage contract and legal ownership of my future. I stood at my window, watching the sun disappear behind the compound walls. This was my last sunset as just Safiya. Tomorrow, after the ceremony, I would become the prince's property. The wedding itself was still weeks away, but the engagement was binding, a contract signed, a transaction completed. After tomorrow, there would be no escape. The gold jewelry sat on my dresser, polished and ready. The white dress hung on my closet door like a ghost. Everything was prepared for my disappearance. I tried to pray toward Mecca out of habit, out of 12 years of conditioning, out of desperate hope that maybe Allah would finally answer. But my body wouldn't cooperate. My knees wouldn't bend in that direction. My heart wouldn't form the familiar Arabic words. Instead, I sank to the floor in the middle of my room, wrapped my arms around my knees, and began to shake. Tomorrow. It was tomorrow. In less than 12 hours, my childhood would be officially sold, signed, sealed. The prince would place a ring on my finger, a collar around my neck, and I would smile because that's what good girls do. The trembling turned into sobbing, deep, gasping sobs that came from somewhere primal and terrified. I pressed my face against my knees and let the sound pour out, not caring anymore if anyone heard. Jesus. His name tore from my throat. Jesus, please. I didn't pray toward Mecca. I didn't face any particular direction. I just looked up through my ceiling, up past the roof, up into whatever existed beyond this prison, and I spoke to a God I'd only read about in secret. If you're real. My voice broke. If you really love children, if you really see people like me, please don't let this happen. Please. I don't want to disappear. I don't want to be owned. I just want to be a child. Please, Jesus, please. The words dissolved into wordless crying. I felt foolish, desperate, insane for praying to a God my family said was false, for breaking every rule I'd ever been taught, for hoping in something I couldn't see or prove or even fully understand. But I had nothing left to lose. Please, I whispered one more time. Please see me. Then. The room changed. Not visually. The furniture didn't move. The lights didn't flicker. Nothing dramatic or theatrical happened. But the atmosphere shifted in a way I can't fully explain. The air became thick with something I'd never felt before. Not oppressive, the opposite. Present. Like the room had been empty my whole life and suddenly someone had entered it. The fear that had been choking me began to loosen its grip. A warmth surrounded me, not physical heat, but something deeper. It wrapped around my trembling body like invisible arms, gentle but impossibly strong. I felt held. Protected. Seen. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly safe. Then the voice came, not audible, not in my ears, but inside my heart, clearer than any sound I'd ever heard. You are mine. My breath caught. You were not created to be owned by men. You were created to be loved by me. The warmth intensified, pushing into spaces I didn't know were empty, filling cracks I didn't know existed. Love, not the conditional love I'd known from my family, not the transactional love my religion taught, but something pure and fierce and absolutely unconditional, flooded through me. I see you, Safiya. I have always seen you. And I will not let you disappear. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't fear anymore. They were something else, relief, recognition, the sense of finally being known by someone who actually cared. I knew with absolute certainty, beyond doubt, beyond logic, beyond everything I'd been taught, that Jesus was real. He wasn't distant like Allah had always felt. He wasn't silent. He wasn't uncaring about what happened to 12-year-old girls trapped in cages made of tradition and honor. He was here. With me. For me. I don't know what to do, I whispered aloud. The presence didn't fade. The warmth remained. And though I heard no more words, something settled in my chest, something that felt like courage I didn't possess on my own. I sat on that floor for hours, wrapped in a peace that made no logical sense. Tomorrow was still coming. The engagement was still scheduled. The prince was still waiting. But something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. When dawn finally broke through my window, painting the room in shades of gold and pink, I stood up on steady legs. My face was tear-stained but calm. My hands had stopped shaking. I looked at the white dress hanging in my closet, and for the first time, I didn't see inevitability. I saw a battle. And Jesus had just shown up to fight for me. The house erupted in activity at dawn. Servants rushed through hallways carrying flower arrangements and trays of refreshments. My mother knocked on my door at 6 a.m., her voice tight and controlled. Time to get ready, Safiya. The hair and makeup artist will be here in an hour. I sat on my bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and felt that strange new courage burning in my chest like a flame that couldn't be extinguished. Safiya? My mother's voice grew sharper. Did you hear me? I heard you. But I didn't move. The stylists arrived and transformed my room into a salon. They pulled my hair, painted my face, draped me in the white dress and the heavy gold jewelry. I let them move me like a doll, but inside, that flame kept burning. You are mine. You were not created to be owned. At 11 a.m., cars began arriving. I watched from my window as the prince's entourage pulled through the gates, black SUVs with tinted windows, security guards in dark suits, the prince himself emerging in pristine white robes that made him look even older in the harsh morning sun. My father knocked on my door. It's time. The flame became an inferno. Safiya. Now. I stood up, my legs steadier than they'd been in weeks. No. Silence. Then, what did you say? I said no. My voice was quiet but clear. I'm not coming out. The door handle rattled. Still locked from the outside, ironic that the mechanism meant to trap me was now keeping my father out. Open this door immediately. No. Safiya. His fist pounded against the wood. The prince is here. The guests are arriving. You will not embarrass this family. I don't care. The scream tore from my throat, primal and desperate. I don't care about honor. I don't care about the family. I'm 12 years old and I'm not marrying him. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Male voices. The sound of a key scraping in the lock. The door burst open. My father stood there, face purple with rage, with male relatives and the prince's security behind him. The prince himself appeared at the top of the stairs, irritation flickering across his weathered face. I will not marry you. I screamed at him directly. You're old enough to be my grandfather. This is wrong. I would rather die than. My father's hand rose, and for a moment I saw murder in his eyes. Then the front door exploded open downstairs. Stop. Everyone freeze. The command came in Arabic, then English. Heavy footsteps pounded through the entrance hall. Men in suits, not traditional Saudi dress, flooded into the house with the authority of people who didn't need permission. What is the meaning of, my father started. Prince Mansour bin Abdulaziz? A tall man with an identification badge addressed the prince directly. I'm Special Agent Ramon with Interpol, working in coordination with International Child Protection Services. You're under investigation for multiple cases of child marriage and human trafficking. The blood drained from the prince's face. "This is outrageous," my father sputtered. "This is a private family matter." "This is a criminal matter," another official cut him off, a woman with kind eyes who immediately looked at me. "Is this the child in question?" "Safiya Al-Harthi, age 12. I nodded, unable to speak. "We received a report 3 days ago detailing this arrangement," she continued, now addressing my father. "An engagement ceremony between a 12-year-old child and a 62-year-old man with a documented history of similar marriages to minors." The house erupted into chaos. The prince's security tried to intervene but were outnumbered. My father shouted about sovereignty and cultural traditions and false accusations. Male relatives argued in heated Arabic. Female relatives emerged from downstairs rooms, hands over their mouths. I stood frozen in my doorway, watching justice arrive in the form of badges and legal documents and people who believed a child's life was worth more than a family's honor. "Who reported this?" the prince demanded, his calm facade cracking. "Who dared?" "The report was anonymous," Agent Ramon said. "But the evidence was thorough. We have documentation of 4 previous marriages to girls between the ages of 11 and 14. Your diplomatic immunity won't protect you this time. I would never know who made that call. Never know what person had seen or heard about my situation and decided to act. An anonymous servant? A horrified relative? Someone who'd found my search history on the tablet? Or maybe, probably, Jesus had simply moved in ways I couldn't see." The officials were efficient. Within 30 minutes, the prince was being escorted out in handcuffs, still protesting. The engagement was officially halted. The contracts, unsigned, were seized as evidence. My father stood in the ruins of his carefully planned transaction, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. He looked at me once, just once, with an expression that said this betrayal would never be forgiven. I didn't care. The female official approached me gently. "Safiya, you're safe now. Do you understand? This marriage will not happen." I collapsed against the doorframe, my legs finally giving out, the white dress pulling around me. Safe. For the first time in my life, I was safe. And somewhere beyond the chaos and shouting and shattered plans, I whispered 2 words only Jesus could hear. "Thank you." The officials left before sunset, taking the prince and their evidence with them. But they left behind something more dangerous than an angry old man in handcuffs. They left behind my father's rage and a family's shattered honor. That night, the house fell into a terrible silence. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father locked himself in his office, his voice a low rumble on international phone calls I couldn't quite hear. Servants whispered in corners, their eyes darting to me with expressions I couldn't read, some pitying, some resentful, all afraid. I understood with cold clarity, I had humiliated them. And in a world where honor mattered more than life, that made me dangerous. I locked my door and pushed my dresser against it, my heart hammering. Outside my window, I saw my father's security consultant arrive, a man known for making problems disappear quietly. They spoke in the garden, their gestures sharp and deliberate. I wasn't safe here. Not anymore. At 2 a.m., a soft knock came at my window. I froze, my breath catching. My room was on the 2nd floor. No one should be able to reach my window. The knock came again, urgent but quiet. Then a woman's voice, barely above a whisper, "Safiya. If you want to leave, you need to come with me now." I crept to the window and pulled back the curtain. A woman in dark clothes clung to a ladder propped against the wall, her face partially covered but her eyes urgent and kind. "Who are you?" "Someone who helps girls like you. We don't have time, your father is making arrangements to send you away tomorrow. Somewhere we can't reach you." My blood turned to ice. I thought of stories I'd heard whispered, girls who dishonored their families and disappeared to remote villages, psychiatric facilities, or worse. We received word from the same person who called Interpol, the woman continued in rapid Arabic. There's a network. We protect girls at risk. But you have to trust me, and you have to come now. Every instinct screamed danger. I'd been taught never to trust strangers, especially women who climb through windows in the middle of the night. But I'd also been taught to submit to a 60-year-old man, and Jesus had shown me that some rules were meant to be broken. I looked at the woman's eyes, really looked. And I saw the same fierce protectiveness I'd felt in Jesus' presence the night before. 60 seconds, she said. Bring nothing that shows where you're from. No phone, no jewelry, nothing they can track. I grabbed my passport from its hiding place, changed into dark clothes, and climbed out the window on shaking legs. The ladder swayed terrifyingly, but the woman's grip on my arm was steady. We descended into darkness. A van waited at the far edge of the property, beyond the security camera's range. The woman, she finally told me her name was Layla, pushed me into the back and covered me with blankets that smelled like dust and fear and other girls who'd lain beneath them. Stay down. Don't make a sound. We have 3 checkpoints before the border. The engine started, and we moved through the sleeping compound. I felt every bump, every turn, certain that at any moment we'd be stopped, that my father's men would tear open the doors and drag me back. Under the blankets, I prayed in fragments, Jesus, please. Jesus, hide me. Jesus, get me out. The first checkpoint, the compound gate. Muffled voices. Layla's calm responses. My heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. We moved forward. The second checkpoint, a police stop on the highway. More voices. Papers rustling. Layla laughing at something, casual and unconcerned while I suffocated under wool blankets and terror. We moved forward. The third checkpoint, the border crossing. This one took longer. My legs cramped. Sweat soaked through my clothes. I heard dogs barking and nearly screamed. Then Layla's voice, just educational materials. Books for the girls' school. A pause that lasted eternities. Go ahead. We moved forward. When Layla finally pulled the blankets off me, dawn was breaking over unfamiliar landscape. We were across the border, Jordan, she told me. Safe. At least safer. There's a safe house 2 hours from here, she said, glancing at me in the rear-view mirror. Other girls like you. You'll stay there until we can arrange something more permanent. I looked out the window at the sunrise, the first one I'd ever seen as a free person. Behind me was everything I'd ever known, my mother, my language, my culture, my home. I would never see any of it again. The loss hit me like a physical blow. I would never hear my mother's voice. Never sleep in my own bed. Never walk through those marble halls again. But I was also free. The safe house appeared as the sun climbed higher, a modest building behind high walls, but these walls felt different. Protective, not imprisoning. Layla led me inside to a common room where 5 other girls sat at breakfast. They ranged from maybe 10 to 16, all wearing the same expression, haunted but hopeful, broken but healing. They looked at me and saw themselves. Welcome, one of them said in soft Arabic. You're safe now. I sank into a chair, my body finally releasing the tension it had held for weeks. Safe. The word felt impossible and true at the same time. I had lost everything. And I had gained my life. I've been free for 8 months now. I live in a protected location that I can't name, in a country where girls like me are given asylum instead of being sent back to the families that tried to destroy them. The house isn't luxurious like my father's compound, no marble floors or chandeliers, but it has something far more valuable. It has windows I can look out of without fear. Learning to be a child again has been harder than I expected. The first morning at the safe house, the other girls invited me to play a game in the courtyard. I stared at them blankly, unsure what play even meant anymore. A 15-year-old named Amira, not my mother's name, but close enough to make my heart ache, took my hand and taught me how to kick a soccer ball. I was terrible at it. But I laughed. And the sound of my own laughter startled me so much I stopped mid-kick and cried instead. "It's okay," Amira said, wrapping her arms around me. "We all cried the first time we laughed too. I attend school now, a real school with other students and teachers who don't care that I was once promised to a prince. I'm behind in mathematics and science, but ahead in Quran memorization, which feels ironic in ways I can't fully explain. My classmates know nothing of my past. To them, I'm just Safiya, the quiet new girl who sometimes stares out windows like she's seeing something they can't. They don't know I'm seeing freedom for the first time." 3 months after my arrival, Layla asked me a question that changed everything: "Would you like to be baptized?" I knew what baptism meant. I'd read about it during those secret late-night searches on my tablet. It was the Christian declaration of faith, the public statement that you belong to Jesus. But here, in this safe house surrounded by girls from Muslim families, it would be quiet. Private. Safe. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I want that." The baptism happened on a cool evening in a small pool in the courtyard. 7 of us stood in a circle, girls who'd been rescued from forced marriages, honor killings, trafficking, abuse. Girls who'd found Jesus in the darkest moments of their lives and discovered he was real. Layla stood in the water with me, her hands gentle on my shoulders. "Safiya, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he died for your sins and rose again, and that he alone can save you?" "I do." My voice was steady. "He already has." "Then I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." She lowered me under the water, and for a moment I was submerged in darkness and silence. I thought of the girl I'd been, the one who'd learned to lower her eyes and shrink herself and pray prayers that went nowhere. That girl stayed under the water. When I rose, gasping and laughing and crying all at once, I was someone new. Not because the water was magic, but because I'd finally made my choice. I belonged to Jesus. Not to my father, not to a prince, not to traditions that valued honor over human life. I belonged to the God who'd heard a 12-year-old girl's desperate prayer and moved heaven and earth to answer it. The other girls surrounded me, wrapping me in towels and embracing me like the sisters I'd never had. We were a family now, not bound by blood, but by survival and salvation and the Jesus who'd refused to let any of us disappear. I'm still 12, though some days I feel ancient, and other days I feel like I'm finally learning what 12 is supposed to feel like. I wake up without dread now. I eat breakfast without someone measuring every bite. I attend school and make friends, and sometimes, more and more often, I forget to be afraid. But I haven't forgotten what Jesus did for me. That's why I'm sharing this story, even though it's dangerous, even though my family would kill me if they found me, even though every word I speak is a risk. Because I need you to know something. If Jesus could hear the desperate prayer of a 12-year-old girl with no power, no rights, and no voice, he can hear you too. If he could reach into a locked room in Saudi Arabia and speak love to a child who'd only ever known fear, he can reach you wherever you are. No tradition is stronger than his love. No culture, no religion, no family honor can build walls high enough to keep him out. No darkness can hide a child, or anyone, from his reach. I was supposed to disappear behind palace walls and never be seen again. I was supposed to become just another statistic, another child bride, another girl whose dreams died before she turned 13. But Jesus said, "You are mine." And everything changed. Maybe you're reading this and you feel trapped, not by forced marriage, but by something else. Addiction. Abuse. Shame. Depression. A life that feels like it's already over even though you're still breathing. Maybe you've been praying to a God who feels distant and silent and uncaring. Or maybe you've never prayed at all. I want you to know, Jesus is real. He sees you. He hears you. And He specializes in impossible rescues. You don't have to clean yourself up first. You don't have to be good enough or worthy enough or religious enough. You just have to whisper His name like I did, desperate and afraid and hoping against hope that someone is actually listening. He is. He was listening to me in that locked room. He's listening to you right now. Jesus saves. Not just from forced marriages, but from every kind of prison, the ones with bars and the ones built inside our own hearts. He saved me when the world said it was too late. He can save you too. My name is Safiya Al-Harthi. I'm 12 years old. And I'm telling you, Jesus is real, His love is stronger than death, and no one is beyond His reach. If my story touched you, share it. Tell someone. Let them know that hope exists even in the darkest places. And if you need saving, whatever that looks like for you, just whisper His name. He's already listening.